a 12-year-old boy sent to buy bread, gunned down in the streets of Nairobi. His name was Bonafas Karaoke, and his death sparked a fire that's shaking a continent. This isn't just Kenya's story, it's Africa standing at a crossroads. President William Ruto, once a beacon of hope, now faces a historic reckoning. A West African alliance thousands of miles away has branded him a regional security threat. Why leaked audio snipers in crowds and 51 lives lost in just 10 days? But what I'm about to reveal will make you question everything you thought you knew about power and accountability in Africa. From grieving mothers to defiant leaders, this is the raw, unfiltered truth of a nation on edge. Stay with us because the real story is just beginning. And the truth behind this crisis will leave you speechless. In the heart of East Africa, Kenya is burning, not with flames but with rage, grief, and a demand for justice. It started with protests, ordinary citizens rising against harsh tax hikes and austerity laws. But what began as peaceful dissent turned deadly. Between July 7th and 17th, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights reported 51 civilians killed, over 500 arrested, and countless injured. In Nairobi, Kisumu, and Eldoret, unarmed protesters faced live ammunition. Hospitals overflowed with trauma cases, and mothers like Susan Jerry, whose 12-year-old son Bonafas Karaoke was shot dead while buying bread, were left shattered. This wasn't just a policy dispute, it was state-sponsored violence, raw and relentless. Across the continent in Accra, Ghana, a West African alliance called ECOWAS took notice. Known for trade deals, they did something unprecedented. They labeled Kenya's President William Ruto a regional security threat. No press conference, no fanfare, just a closed-door vote that sent shockwaves from Nairobi to Lagos. Why would ECOWAS, thousands of miles away, risk diplomatic chaos to challenge a sitting president? It wasn't politics. It was the blood on the tarmac, the abandoned shoes of a child, and a leaked voice recording allegedly of Ruto himself, cold and commanding. Shoot to kill. This is Africa. Unfiltered, a continent no longer waiting for Western verdicts, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. The real question is, what did ECOWAS uncover that made them act so boldly? Stay tuned because the evidence will shock you. The real question is, what did ECOWAS uncover that made them act so boldly? In a locked conference room in Accra, Ghana, leaders from Nigeria, Burkina Faso, and Ghana pored over evidence that no government wants to see the light of day. Eyewitness accounts detailed snipers aiming into crowds of unarmed protesters. Autopsy reports confirmed bullets in the bodies of children, students, and volunteers. Video footage captured the chaos, mothers screaming, bodies falling beside posters demanding justice. But the most damning piece of evidence was a voice recording allegedly from President William Ruto himself. His words calm and calculated: shoot them in the leg. If they push further, shoot to kill. No hesitation, no remorse, just a chilling command. This wasn't a panicked order in the heat of battle. It was a strategy, cold and deliberate. I'll come back to this recording later because it's going to change everything. Kenya's protests began over finance reforms, tax hikes, and austerity measures that squeezed an already struggling population. But when citizens took to the streets, they didn't just face tear gas or batons. In Nairobi's Pangani suburb, 12-year-old Bonafas Karaoke was shot dead, his blood staining the bread he was sent to buy. In Kisumu, a university student live-streaming a peaceful march collapsed, his final breath broadcast to the world. In Nakuru, a 12-year-old girl was killed by a stray bullet while playing inside her home. And in Mathari's slums, volunteer nurse Mary Akin vanished after treating wounded protesters, her clinic surrounded by plainclothes men. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights tallied 51 deaths, over 500 arrests, and dozens missing in just 10 days. These weren't numbers, they were names, lives, dreams snuffed out. And this is when I discovered something unbelievable. ECOWAS didn't act on rumors. Their legal experts, forensic analysts, and civil society observers traveled to Nairobi and beyond, collecting stories that cut deeper than statistics. They returned with proof, autopsy reports showing execution-style wounds, footage of police firing into crowds, and testimonies from survivors like Susan Jerry, Bonifas's mother, who said, They killed his dream to be a pilot before it could fly. This evidence fueled a historic resolution drafted in Lagos and signed in Accra, declaring Ruto a regional security threat. 8. ECOWAS nations voted to deny him entry, suspend diplomatic ties, and even consider detaining him for investigation. This wasn't symbolic, it was a legal warning, a thunderclap across Africa. For the first time, a continent long told to wait for Western courts said, "We will judge our own." But the story doesn't end here. Pause for a moment. Imagine a mother walking past her son's school every day carrying grief the size of a nation. Now imagine a president accused of ordering that grief. What happens when power becomes a license to kill? In Kenya, the answer is unfolding in real time. Ruto's response was swift and defiant. In a televised address flanked by national flags, he called ECOWAS's move a coordinated attempt to undermine East Africa. He accused West African leaders of being manipulated by hidden interests, hinting at neo-colonial forces without naming them. But behind his steely words, cracks were forming. Opposition leader Raila Odinga demanded an investigation into the administration's role in the killings. Even Ruto's own party saw defections, with MPs supporting a motion to suspend his powers pending a civil inquiry. The judiciary, led by Chief Justice Martha Koome, affirmed its independence, declaring justice is not optional. On the streets, posters of victims' names, Bonafas Wanjiru Thomas, became rallying cries. Every denial from State House sounded like deflection. Every silence like guilt. This is when the real mystery begins. But what happens when a continent decides to hold its own accountable? The next move will shake Africa to its core. Remember that voice recording I mentioned? Here's why it matters. The alleged audio of President William Ruto ordering lethal force isn't just a soundbite. It's a window into a leadership style that's rattled a continent. ECOWAS's resolution to label Ruto a regional security threat wasn't born in a vacuum. It was built on evidence, sniper footage, autopsy reports, and testimonies from grieving families like Susan Jerry's, whose son Bonafas was killed at 12. This evidence paints a picture of state violence not as a reaction, but as a strategy. When a president allegedly says, "shoot to kill," and children end up dead, the stakes aren't just political, they're moral. This affects every single one of us. Because if Kenya's government can target its own, what stops others from following? Let's break it down. ECOWAS, a West African bloc traditionally focused on trade, stepped into uncharted territory. Their resolution, signed by 8 nations, demands accountability not from the UN or ICC, but from Africans themselves. This is unprecedented. Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo framed it starkly. If we must keep peace, we must hold each other accountable. Nigeria's foreign minister added, "Today it's Kenya, tomorrow it could be us." Their actions, recalling ambassadors, suspending ties, and restricting air corridors, aren't just diplomatic slaps. They're a signal that sovereignty doesn't mean impunity. But here's the curiosity gap. Why did ECOWAS act so decisively when global powers like the UN stayed cautious? The answer lies in the victim stories, from Bonafas to the disappeared nurse Mary Akin, whose names became a continental rallying cry. If you think this is shocking, wait until you hear what comes next. On the other side, Ruto's defiance is a masterclass in political survival. His televised speeches accusing ECOWAS of being a pawn for hidden interests rally his base but alienate moderates. His diplomatic scramble, sending envoys to Uganda and Tanzania, shows a leader under siege, not in control. Yet his accusations of neocolonialism resonate with some, framing ECOWAS as a Western-influenced bloc. This narrative is shaky. ECOWAS's evidence came from African soil, Nairobi's streets, Kisumu's hospitals, Nakuru's homes. The data speaks for itself. 51 dead, 500 arrested, dozens missing. Ruto's countermove, proposing an African sovereignty summit, is bold but risky. It could either split the continent or expose his isolation. Meanwhile, Kenya's opposition, led by Raila Odinga and defecting MPs from Ruto's own party, are pushing for a civil inquiry. Chief Justice Martha Koome's statement on judicial independence adds pressure. The judiciary, opposition, and street protests are converging, threatening to crack Ruto's foundation. When loyalty falters at the top, how long before the whole structure collapses? The broader impact is seismic. ECOWAS's move challenges the African Union's cautious diplomacy, forcing it to pick a side. Western powers like the US and UK urge restraint, wary of losing Kenya as a regional ally, but ECOWAS isn't backing down. Discussions of sanctions, travel bans, asset freezes are underway, though not yet finalized. For Kenya's people, the cost is already clear: grieving families, silenced voices, and a nation divided. Newspapers like the Daily Nation scream a house divided, while posters of victims' names, Bonafas Wanjiru Thomas, line the streets. This is absolutely heartbreaking. A nation mourning its children, while its leader digs in. The question isn't just about Ruto's fate, but about what Africa becomes. Will it embrace accountability, or will old habits of silence prevail? The consequences of this will last for decades. The recording of Ruto's alleged orders changes everything, but the real shift is happening on the ground. And this is when I discovered something unbelievable about who's really pulling the strings. But what happens when a continent's resolve meets a leader's defiance? The answer will blow your mind. And this is where things start to get really strange. Kenya's crisis isn't just a national tragedy, it's a mirror reflecting Africa's past and future. Historically, the continent has seen leaders dodge accountability, often shielded by sovereignty or Western indifference. Think of Uganda's Idi Amin in the 1970s, whose atrocities went unchecked until Tanzania intervened, or Zimbabwe's Robert Mugabe, whose regime leaned on anti-colonial rhetoric to deflect criticism. Kenya's situation echoes these moments but flips the script. ECOWAS, a West African trade bloc, isn't waiting for foreign courts like the ICC. Their resolution against President William Ruto marks a shift, Africa policing its own. This is absolutely heartbreaking, because it took the deaths of 51 people, including 12-year-old Bonafas Karaoke, to force this reckoning. But what does it mean when a continent starts judging its own leaders? The parallels are chilling. In 1994, Rwanda's genocide unfolded while global powers dithered. Africa learned then that silence from the high table can be deadly. Today, ECOWAS's move, driven by Ghana, Nigeria, and Burkina Faso, rejects that silence. Their evidence, from sniper footage to Ruto's alleged shoot-to-kill audio, isn't borrowed from Western NGOs. It's African-gathered, African-verified. Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso put it bluntly: Africa must not wait to be saved. His words resonate because they challenge a decades-old norm. African leaders rarely call out their peers. ECOWAS's resolution, signed in Accra, declares that sovereignty shall not shield slaughter. This isn't just about Kenya, it's a warning to every capital from Addis Ababa to Harare. The data speaks for itself. 8 nations freezing ties with Nairobi signals a new African doctrine. Regionally, the implications are massive. Kenya, East Africa's economic hub, faces isolation. Ruto's diplomatic overtures to Uganda and Tanzania aim to counter this, but they're shaky. Uganda's Museveni and Tanzania's Samia Suluhu Hassan offered polite nods, not firm alliances. Meanwhile, the African Union is caught in a bind, urging de-escalation to avoid a split between East and West Africa. Ruto's accusation of neo-colonial manipulation by ECOWAS Stokes Division, but it's a weak card. The evidence: 51 deaths, 500 arrests. Missing persons like Nurse Mary Aking comes from Kenyan soil, not foreign agendas. This should terrify everyone, because if ECOWAS can target Ruto, who's next? The continent is watching not just for justice, but for what African unity means when blood is spilled. This will make you angry. Kenya's people aren't just fighting for Bonafas or the girl shot in Nakuru, they're fighting a system that's long protected power over lives. Grassroots movements from Nairobi's universities to Kisumu's streets are chanting victims' names like a liturgy. Opposition leader Raila Odinga's call for an inquiry, backed by defecting MPs, and Chief Justice Martha Koome's stand for judicial independence, shows Kenya fracturing internally. Ruto's Sovereignty Summit proposal is a desperate bid to rally Pan-African support, but it risks backfiring. If ECOWAS holds firm, sanctions like travel bans or asset freezes could follow, squeezing Kenya's elite. The continent's tired of children dying, tired of impunity dressed as governance. And this is when I discovered something that shouldn't exist: a growing belief that Africa can write its own justice. ECOWAS's stand isn't just about Ruto, it's about redefining what Africa tolerates. The names of Bonafas Wanjiru and Thomas aren't just memories, they're a movement shaking a continent. But what happens next will blow your mind, because the fallout could change Africa forever. This is when I discovered something that shouldn't exist. A continent daring to hold its own leaders accountable, no longer waiting for Western approval. ECOWAS's resolution against Kenya's President William Ruto, branding him a regional security threat, has set a precedent that could reshape Africa. But what happens next? The stakes are higher than ever. If ECOWAS pushes forward with sanctions like travel bans or asset freezes, Kenya's economy and diplomatic clout could take a hit. Nairobi, East Africa's hub, risks isolation as 8 ECOWAS nations have already suspended ties. This changes everything we thought we knew. Because Africa policing its own isn't just a headline, it's a seismic shift. But the real question is, will Ruto bend, fight, or fall? Ruto doubles down. His televised defiance, accusing ECOWAS of being a neo-colonial pawn, suggests he's banking on national pride and East African allies. His envoys to Uganda and Tanzania sought support, but lukewarm responses from Museveni and Suluhu show cracks in that plan. Ruto's proposed African Sovereignty Summit could rally anti-Western sentiment, but it's a gamble. If it flops, he's left exposed, facing a united ECOWAS and a restless Kenyan opposition. Raila Odinga's push for a civil inquiry backed by defecting MPs and Chief Justice Martha Koom's judicial stance could corner him. Emergency laws or crackdowns might buy time, but they'd fuel protests. This affects every single one of us. Because a leader suppressing his people to survive risks turning Kenya into a pariah state. Ruto compromises. Facing sanctions and domestic pressure, he could allow an independent probe into the 51 deaths, 500 arrests, and missing persons like Nurse Mary Aking. This would mean admitting fault. Not easy for a leader who's built his image on strength. ECOWAS might ease its measures if Kenya cooperates, but Ruto's base could see this as weakness. The streets chanting names like Bonafas Karaoke won't settle for half measures. The data speaks for itself. 70 lives lost, countless injured, and a nation divided demand transparency. A partial inquiry might calm diplomats, but not mothers like Susan Jerry, who lost her son. This is just the tip of the iceberg, because any concession could spark demands for broader reforms. Africa's new doctrine takes root. ECOWAS's resolve, led by Ghana's Nana Akufo-Addo and Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré, could inspire other blocs. The African Union, so far cautious, might back a continent-wide accountability framework. This would be historic, signaling that sovereignty doesn't shield slaughter. But it's not without risks. Ruto's accusations of West African manipulation could deepen East-West divides, fracturing African unity. Western powers urging restraint to protect Kenya as an ally might quietly pressure ECOWAS to back off. If you think this is shocking, wait until you hear what comes next, because a united Africa policing its own could challenge global power dynamics. The Kenyan people will bear the cost. Protests continue with murals of victims' names, Bonafas Wanjiru, Thomas, painted on crumbling walls. Social media amplifies their grief with hashtags like #Justice for Bonafas trending. Leading researchers are calling this unprecedented, a grassroots movement meeting continental action. But economic sanctions or diplomatic isolation could raise living costs, hitting the poorest hardest. Ruto's survival tactics, surveillance purges, or media control might silence dissent but inflame it long term. This will make you angry, because while leaders spar, families bury their children in silence. Every second counts, because Kenya's next steps could redefine African justice or deepen its wounds. Even opposition leaders and judges are rallying, proving this isn't just a protest, it's a reckoning. Hold on, the most important part is still coming, because the final choice isn't Ruto's, it's Africa's. Hold on, the most important part is still coming, because the final choice isn't just President William Ruto's, it's Africa's. The blood of 51 Kenyans, including 12-year-old Bonafas Karaoke, has forced a continent to face its own conscience. ECOWAS's historic resolution labeling Ruto a regional security threat marks a turning point. No longer waiting for Western courts, Africa is daring to judge its own. From the streets of Nairobi to the council rooms of Accra, names like Bonafas Wanjiru and Mary Aking echo as a call for accountability. This is absolutely heartbreaking. But it's also a spark. Kenya's protests, its defiant opposition, and Chief Justice Martha Koome's stand show a nation refusing to stay silent. ECOWAS's resolve, backed by Ghana and Nigeria, proves a continent tired of impunity. This changes everything we thought we knew, because African justice is rising from African soil. But the road ahead is uncertain. Will Ruto face his people, or will he dig in, risking isolation? Will Africa's new doctrine of accountability hold, or will old divisions fracture it? These questions aren't just for diplomats, they're for you. This will make you angry, but it should also inspire you. If a child's death in Mathare can move leaders in Accra, your voice matters too. Share your thoughts below. Should Africa police its own leaders? Or is this a step too far? And type African unity. If you believe justice must rise from our own land, stay with us. Subscribe, like, and share this story to keep the truth alive, raw, and unfiltered. Your support amplifies the voices of Bonafas, Susan Jerry, and countless others. And in the next video, I'll reveal what even the experts are afraid to say about where Kenya and Africa goes from here. Don't miss it. Drop your city in the comments. Let's see where this story is reaching. Hit subscribe for more unfiltered stories that uncover the heart of Africa's fight for justice. And in the next video, I'll reveal the hidden forces shaping Africa's next move.